Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking about Episode 5 of Season 2 of Ultimate Spider-Man called Hawkeye. And that is, of course, the name of this episode's special guest star. Which, Spider-Man Hawkeye team-up, well, that's certainly a recipe for really good storytelling. Unfortunately, that's not what we really get here. To be perfectly blunt, what we get this time around is basically every cliche pulled from pretty much every mediocre buddy cop movie it's ever been my misfortune to sit through. I mean, I really did feel myself while I was watching this episode just like thinking, can this episode be all over already? I want to go play Civilization 5, Attila the Hun needs me to lead him to ultimate victory, okay? So, yeah. Now, honestly, the story in this episode is really just paper thin, and it's really just serves as a device to show us Hawkeye and Spider-Man bouncing off each other, which, as I said, is potentially a recipe for some really cool stuff, but it just doesn't happen here. But anyway, there are some things I did want to talk about, so let's get right into it. First of all, we get to see quite a bit of Spidey trashing stuff in relation to J. Jonah Jameson. This is, of course, a venerable Spider-Man tradition, so I'm all for that. It does seem a little odd, though, that Hawkeye is so fine with joining in that, given that he's a well-known fellow who is now engaged in what is basically petty vandalism. And Spidey isn't exactly helping his case with Jonah, given the fact that he's basically going out and engaging what can only be described as epic-level reckless driving on what I assume is the Brooklyn Bridge, or maybe the George Washington Bridge. Yeah. Actually, yeah, probably the George Washington Bridge or something like that. My New York City geography is not that great. So he's doing this in full view of thousands of New Yorkers, just because he's bored. This is just like one of those Russian driving fail videos from YouTube, just kind of waiting to happen. I mean, what happens if Peter kind of goofs on his bike and ends up, smashing into some SUV full of a soccer mom and a bunch of kids? I mean, granted, he's probably going to be heading to the hospital, if not the morgue, but still, you'd think that Nick Fury would get on Peter's case to act a little bit more, responsible than this. But no, kids. Instead, we have Spider-Man delivering the message that reckless driving is cool. Although I do like the fact that this episode did take a moment for Hawkeye to point out just how ridiculous it is for Spider-Man to be bouncing around on a motorcycle. Something, if you've been watching my reviews of this series from the start, you'll note that I harped on more than a little bit at the very beginning of this series. But at this point, I've just accepted it as part of the ridiculousness just inherent with this show. And of course, this is simply due to the show being aimed at elementary school age kids. So, I've learned to live with that. It still doesn't stop it from being kind of dumb, though. Anyway, hey, and speaking of irresponsible behavior on the part of our heroes, did you notice think about this for a moment. When they blew up that big TV screen with Jonah on it, they just sort of continued on about their merry way, paying not the slightest bit of mind that they just caused God only knows how many pounds, if not tons, of debris to plummet down onto the streets and the innocent New Yorkers going about their business below. I mean, there's probably like half a dozen people who got sliced to ribbons by the glass or shards of plastic from that thing. But, yeah. Okay, yes, I am overthinking this. And yes, as I said, this is a kid's show. But, what can I say? Okay, hey, speaking of stuff that seems weak in the writing department, when Hawkeye says, okay, I'm tracking the Beetle down. Okay, how are you doing that? I mean, what exactly are you tracking? If you'd said, like, during the fight at the hangar, I managed to plant a tracer on him. Okay, fine, that would make sense. It's a trick that makes sense somebody who's a trained SHIELD agent would do. We've certainly seen Spider-Man do exactly the same thing with his spider tracers dozens of times. But no, it's not explained at all how it is that Hawkeye is tracking this guy. I mean, this feels like, well, basically, they're not only pulling all the cliches and lazy work out of the buddy cop movies, it sort of feels like they went and grabbed yeah, whatever, we got some fancy tech, so we don't really need to explain exactly what it is how exactly we're tracking this down thing, like out of an episode of Star Trek Voyager. Yeah, boy, there's a show that'll get you ranting, huh? Oh, boy. That show had so much potential starting out. But enough about the disappointments of various Star Trek programs. We have the disappointments of Ultimate Spider-Man to talk about. And remember, folks, I like to keep things positive and focus on the good aspects of the shows that I review here, just in case you've forgotten. Okay, so let me see here. We also have one little bit of additional ridiculousness to deal with, and that is that Peter is apparently amazingly good at guessing what it is the Beetle is going to do next, based on virtually no evidence whatsoever. And, I mean, he just sort of, at the end, just guesses that the Beetle is going to go back to where he first encountered Spider-Man. Why go back to the warehouse, which he knows is going to be crawling with S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who are probably even more heavily armed than they were earlier? Why not go back into the middle of the city and, start smashing some stuff up? Go back to where he first found them before the big fight in this episode started. Going back to the hangar just absolutely makes no sense. Okay, let me see here. Just look at my notes real quick. No, that basically covers everything that I had to say about the show in the negative light. We don't really get to see very much of the amazing friends this time around, and what we do see of them is typical. These guys can't get along for anything. Although I did like the fact that they acknowledged that suddenly having 6 people and 1 bathroom in a house is going to be a chaotic situation. I mean, I grew up in a family with 1 bathroom and 3 of us, and that could be hectic enough. If you'd managed to double it, oh man. So yeah. Now let's talk about what I guess is really the episode's strongest point, at least for me anyway, and that is the voice actor for Hawkeye. This is none other than Troy Baker. Very experienced voice actor, and he's probably best known to folks as the voice of Kanji Tatsumi in the insanely awesome RPG Persona 4. I mean, seriously, if you notice, I recently posted my first review of the Persona 4 anime, which I'm going to review in its entirety eventually. And you may have even heard me mention before on my various videos just how much I love Persona 4. It is easily my second favorite RPG of all time. I cannot say enough good things about how awesome that is. And Baker does an absolutely great job as Kanji. He just totally rocks that character. So, the thing though here is that Troy Baker as Hawkeye is also going to be on the upcoming Avengers Assemble cartoon, which is going to be coming out later this year. So, while that's cool, he certainly does seem to have the more abrasive aspects of Hawkeye's personality down, but doesn't do it in such a way that you don't get the feeling that underneath the rough edges there's a pretty good guy in there. So really, no knock at all against Troy Baker. He's doing great stuff with what he has to work with. The real thing here is, though, this just basically feels like a subtle commercial for the upcoming Avengers Assemble cartoon. It's like this episode was made entirely to be a preview, and that the only reason that Hawkeye is here is simply because he's a popular character right now. Now, I can't knock Marvel for doing that, for putting him in here. Because, well, as I said, Hawkeye is a popular character right now. It just makes sense from a business perspective. And let's never forget that Marvel, at the end of the day, is a business that's now owned by the good folks at Disney. So, yeah, it makes sense that they would do this, but if they had done it so that there was just a little more substance here, then I really wouldn't have minded this at all. But here, it just feels shallow and weak. And like I said, while I was watching this episode, I was mostly looking forward to it just being over so I could do something else. Now, by any standard, if that's the feeling that your audience is getting with the show that you're putting on the air, then this episode is not going to go down in the history books as a winner. And this episode does not go down in the history books as a winner. But I have the feeling the show will eventually bounce back. I mean, it's not as if last season didn't have some serious low points, but ultimately came around and delivered a very good story in the end. So, have faith, true believers. Anyway, folks, that's all I got for you this time around. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at HoosierJedi. Till next time, take care and have a good one.